Namaste, and welcome to the Temple of Kriya Yoga. My name is Abhinanda, and we're live streaming this noon meditation today on the 8th of January of 2023, this second Sunday of the month of January of the new year. And in the weeks and months to come, we're hoping to do more live streaming with the idea that we're sharing our energies at the same time, if not in the same place. And hopefully, in time to come, we'll be able to gather in the same place together once again to share our energies at noon Central Time, has historically been done at the temple for decades in the past. I'd like to begin this noon meditation today with a prayer. And if you could just assume a good meditative posture and join me in this prayer. May the infinite Lord of life, love, and laughter bless you at this moment. May each and every cell of your being be healed, healthy, and whole. May your entire mind-body complex be filled to overflowing with vim, vigor, and vitality, and may you truly find that which you seek, surely, swiftly, and most harmoniously. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. As I said, we're live streaming today, and the noon meditation will be available as a recording in the days to come. But again, we're hoping that as we move into the next year and these coming weeks and months, that you'll be joining us in real time for the noon meditations on Sundays. Noon Central Time. The meditation today is entitled Strengthening the Foundation of Your Spiritual Practice. And this is a time of year, astrologically and mystically speaking, really for consolidating and strengthening our foundation. It's the time of Capricorn, as you know. We really have a limited time in this incarnation. I had a friend recently who said to me, I just turned 70. How did that happen? And our time in this life is really very brief. Our mind convinces us otherwise, and we need to cut through that sort of denial that we're setting up permanent residence. But there's a wonderful recent book by Oliver Burkeman entitled 4,000 Weeks. And this book, if we live to age 80, Burkeman has calculated that we have approximately 4,000 weeks to live. And for many of us, we're already well past the halfway point of that. We spend the first years of our lives, maybe the first 10, 20, maybe even the first 30 years of our lives, trying to figure out who we are, what our ego identity is, what's important to us, how to make a life as we're living out this incarnation. And we don't know, but the last years of our lives may be we may be infirmed. We may have really limited energy. We may be unable to practice in any formal sense meditation or some of our other spiritual practices. So I say this not as a downer at all, but simply to impress on you and on me that we do have a limited time in this incarnation, and that what that can do for us is help us to embrace fully the time that we do have. And it's, again, not meant to be a downer or something morbid. This life is going to come to an end. Of course it is, but our minds are very good at convincing us otherwise, and so we're trying to cut through um, that denial, that delusion that we're here permanently, so that we can take full advantage of the time that we have in these moments that we have. Not so much what do they have to give to us, but more what do we want to bring to these moments that we have, these brief moments that we have in this incarnation. And so um, spiritually, the time is now for our practices. We need to be more intentional about strengthening the practices that we are wanting to really emphasize in the coming weeks and months. And of course, in terms of spiritual practice, it's good to distinguish between formal and informal practice. Of course, the formal practice is sitting on the cushion, as we're doing right now, and practicing our meditation, whether that's breathing Kriya, Ai, or Hong Sa Kriya, or practicing another Kriya technique, or doing some other meditation practice that you call your practice, your technique. That's the formal practice, and then there are informal practices. Of course, our spiritual practices, cultivating kindness and compassion, unselfish love, cultivating gratitude, cultivating generosity, cultivating equanimity and balance, fasting, which is a formal practice, but also something that's off of the cushion typically. And fasting helps us on one level work with our attachments. Studying the spiritual texts is another spiritual practice, and devotion to our chosen face of God. These are all wonderful and very important spiritual practices, some formal, some informal. Uh, and it's not that the formal and informal are mutually exclusive. They really complement each other. But I share these as examples to get you to think a little bit today about, okay, so if I was to take one or two or three practices that I really want to strengthen in the coming months, what practice would I choose, or what practices would I choose to emphasize, to really double down, so to speak? Uh, um, in Kriya Yoga, we look to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the eight limbs of yoga, as a guide for our spiritual practice. And so, again, to help us think about the range of spiritual practices that we might choose, one or two or three, to emphasize in the coming weeks and months. We can think about the eight limbs, the yamas and niyamas. There are 10 of those, five each, five yamas, five niyamas. And in my humble opinion, the most important, the one of those yamas and niyamas that is perhaps the most important to really cultivate is santosha, or contentment. And then going along the eight limbs, we have the asana, the practice with the physical body, of the various hatha yoga postures. And this is to help us work with our body and our mind, but working at a physical level in a very direct emphasis. We have uh, the yamas and niyamas, asan, the pranayamas, the various practices of working with the energy, the prana that runs through. And one of the gross ways, as opposed to subtle, one of the gross ways we work with that is in terms of working with our breath. But there are many practices to work with the prana, and so that's the pranayama practices. And so if we're saying, my meditation is good. I'm consistent. I'm meditating deeply. I'm meditating regularly, but maybe I want to work with pranayama practices. Then maybe I would be turning to some of the breathing practices, and many of these practices, the yamas, niyamas, asana, pranayama, are really described very, very well in Spiritual Science of Kriya Yoga by Goswami Kriyananda. So if you would like to delve further into any of these practices, you can turn to that as a resource, the Spiritual Science of Kriya Yoga. After pranayama, we have in the 8 limbs, we have pratyahara. And this is really working with the gross senses, the eyes, the ears, the taste. And what we're trying to do is withdraw the emphasis or the awareness that is so acute on the gross senses in our day in and day out life, so that we can attune to the more subtle senses, and they are there. So pratyahara, withdrawing, or sense withdrawal, is a way that is translated. And then we have dharana, which is focusing on cultivating our ability to concentrate, our concentration abilities, and dhyana, the meditation practice. Again, that would be more the formal meditation practice on the cushion, and of course samadhi, the experience of enlightenment, or unalloyed bliss, and awareness of being and consciousness. So this is another way that we can think about our spiritual practices. If I'm thinking about what spiritual practice do I want to cultivate, or what practices do I want to cultivate, I can look to Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and in particular the 8 limbs of the Yoga Sutra, by Patanjali. Another way that we can think about our spiritual practices is simply to go around the astrological chart by house. So perhaps my spiritual practice that I want to emphasize in the coming weeks and months is first house, polishing my personality. And we probably all could benefit from doing some polishing of our personality. Or second house, financial stability, and that is a spiritual practice to be able to stand on our own financially, and ensure that we have the necessary, food, clothing, shelter, on a basic level, that we are able to care for ourselves in that way, is a spiritual practice. As Goswami Kriyananda so often said, the earth life is the spiritual life, and certainly our financial condition is part of that. A third house of communications, and perhaps we would like to emphasize communication in the coming months and in the coming year, and so we might want to strengthen that in terms of writing, corresponding more with people in our lives that we care for. The fourth house, the home life, and perhaps there's a need to strengthen that area of our lives. Or the fifth house of joy and creativity. Perhaps we want to exercise that more. Ultimately, the greatest joy is spiritual enlightenment. The sixth house of work may be an area that we want to attune to, or spend some time strengthening, or the seventh house of partnership. So like this, we can go right around the chart, house by house, and examine each of those areas of our lives in order to identify some area, some practice that we want to strengthen in the coming year. I'd like to invite us perhaps to spend just a few minutes meditating and seeing if, as we quiet the mind, if if we can attune to a need, attune to an area of our life that we really, a spiritual practice, a spiritual area of our life that we would really like to devote attention. So go ahead and assume a good meditative posture if you are not currently sitting in good posture. And if you would just join me in observing the breath for the next few moments as we attune to the breath, quiet the mind, quiet the body, simply observing the breath flowing in and flowing out, not trying to control it, not trying not to control it, but letting the breath breathe itself. And as you attune to the breath flowing in and flowing out, just observing, just witnessing the breath, not needing to change anything at this moment, but simply watching. Let's raise this question. In the coming weeks, in the coming months, what is the spiritual practice that I would most like to strengthen? What is the spiritual practice that perhaps needs attention at this time? Perhaps it's to meditate longer or more deeply, to breathe more Kriya. Perhaps it's to practice greater joy, to become more joy filled, if for no other reason than you're walking the path. Perhaps it's to become more selfish, more unselfish, I'm sorry, to become more unselfish, to become more kind and loving and compassionate. Perhaps it's to become more grateful. As you quiet the mind and as you raise this question, what is the spiritual practice that most needs attention or that I most desire to strengthen in this coming year? Simply allow the thoughts to arise and notice them. You're not attaching to anything, you're just witnessing. What is the spiritual practice that I most want to cultivate, that I most want to dedicate time and attention to in the coming weeks and months, in this coming year? And vow to yourself that if you slip for a day or a few days or a week in terms of strengthening this spiritual practice, that rather than writing it off and saying to yourself, "Oh, I'll try again next year," simply return to the practice. Just as we wander away from the object of our meditation as we sit and practice meditation, and then we return to it. That's what we're doing with our spiritual practices. Perhaps we wander away and then we bring ourselves back. And we could wander away 100 times in the course of a year, but if each time we bring ourselves back, we have a few hundred more days to work with. So, like that, from this quiet place, hopefully we can identify a spiritual practice, some area of our lives that we want to strengthen, that we want to cultivate in the coming weeks and months of this new year. And Shanti. If you're still having some difficulty, and I realize that this one meditation may not reveal to you or show you the practice that you would like to really put your time and energy into this coming year. If you're still having difficulty, I'd like to suggest something that perhaps we could all cultivate more. And it's really well articulated in a new book titled Wonder Drug. And it's this book is by two physicians, and they're very keen to say that they pride themselves on being data-driven scientists. And they're only looking at the data. They're not looking at uh, um, traditions around the planet, but they conclude something that the spiritual traditions down through time have been telling us. And the wonder drug that they have identified and written a book about is compassion. And what they have concluded is that unselfish love or unselfish service to others is the best medicine for oneself. The very best medicine is unselfish service or compassion. They define compassion. This should not be a surprise to us as empathy plus action. Empathy plus action equals compassion. Empathy plus action equals compassion. And what they found in their research, and it really is a research-driven effort on their part, and a research-filled book, a book that is backed by the best research in physiology and psychology, and and what they find is that even just 40 seconds of meaningful compassion or compassionate action makes a significant difference for the person who's feeling that compassion. Compassion for others really benefits the one who is feeling the compassion. And hopefully this sounds familiar. Kriyananda would say something quite similar to this. Whatsoever we do for another, we do more so for ourselves. And so among the author's findings, these two physicians writing about the wonder drug, compassion, they find that serving others activates the reward system. We all have a reward system that can be activated by a tasty meal. It can be activated by a good conversation with friends. It can be activated by learning something new. You know, The pitfall of the reward system is it can also be activated by various substances that can get us into trouble as they can become larger than ourselves. Um, but the finding of these two physicians writing about the wonder drug, compassion, is that serving others activates the reward system. It also reduces the stress response. It induces calmness. It dials down the expression of genes that are associated with chronic inflammation. It also brings about positive psychological benefits and brings greater emotional well-being. And even the authors found that even brings about greater professional success, if that is something that is of value to us. And so serving others, another finding was that it brings about a longevity benefit. So one lives longer and hopefully with greater quality of life. So it's important to know that this is not a one and done situation. It's not as if we practice compassion once and then our life is transformed. It's like all spiritual practices that we need to sustain them over time. We need to practice them day in and day out, and perhaps multiple times each day. The authors suggest starting small, and they, again, in their research, have concluded that we have, on average, each person has 9 empathy opportunities each day, and we can begin there with these empathy opportunities. The person that approaches us and asks for money, the friend who experiences a loss, or the coworker who's having a difficult day. These are all opportunities for us to express compassion, empathy, and action. Uh, just as an example, just notice what it's like when someone approaches you and asks for money, and perhaps you have a few dollars that you could share, and you choose not to. Notice what happens in your being. For myself, I know when that happens, when I choose not to offer something to help the person who's asking, that I can feel myself closing, even at the heart level. I can feel myself closing. Notice that, and notice, on the other hand, what it's like if you open up. And that is a way of expressing compassion, just one way. There are many others, and as the authors again conclude through their research, there are at least 9 of these opportunities that each of us have per day. It's important, though, and again, this is the idea of unselfish love. It's important that we examine our motivation. The authors again conclude that if we're doing this to get something, then the effect is not there. The positive benefit to our physiology and our psychology does not occur. There's something about our mind that can detect, is this for selfish reasons? In other words, am I giving to get something, or is it truly motivated by an unselfish um, ideal, that I'm not trying to get something? So as the Gita encourages us, we should not be attached to the outcome. We ought not be attached to the fruits of our compassionate action, or our empathy and action leading to compassion. The other person may not appreciate it, but again, we're not doing what we're doing to get something from the other. It's really an act of unselfish love. And it reminds me of an oft-told story by Goswami Kriyananda of driving down Lakeshore Drive, and there was a dog that had been injured there, and he went to help the dog and picked the dog up and it bit him. uh, and this can happen sometimes when we're engaging in unselfish service. The work that we do may not always be appreciated. The work that we do uh, may not be acknowledged, or it can even at times the the person or the people that we're working with can express dissatisfaction or anger, and perhaps it's not even about what we're offering, but it's about that particular time, that day in their life. But again, we're not doing this to get something in return. If it's done for that motivation, I'm giving to get, then it's going to backfire, and the spiritual benefit is not going to be experienced. And what I mean by that, the not just the karmic benefit, but the experience on a physiological and a psychological level. And again, this is coming out of the research that the two authors writing the book, the Wonder Drug, have concluded that motivation is important. It's very important in terms of our service to others. So rather than giving to get something, the authors encourage us to live to give, which I think is a nice uh, sort of affirmation that we could cultivate, to live to give. And they also spend some time with the idea that I and others have talked about at the temple, including a number of talks by Kriyananda, the importance of gratitude. And so the authors talk about the attitude of gratitude is good for us, and being grateful, they found, really primes us to look for additional opportunities to help and to serve other people. There can be a really um, prevalent fallacy that too much compassion leads us to feel burned out, um, that caring too much will lead us to burnout. And again, this book, The Wonder Drug, is, as I mentioned, is written by two physicians, and they don't pull any punches in terms of talking about training in medical school, often encouraging distance, with the idea that if you're distanced from the concerns of your patients, you won't experience burnout. And what they found is just the opposite. With the distancing, with the emotional distancing, it increases the likelihood of burnout. Whereas feeling true compassion, again, unselfish love, unselfish service to others, really is an antidote to burnout. So caring for other people without any desire or intent of receiving something in return, again, unselfish service, is an antidote to experiencing burnout. They mention, and again, this is very familiar, something that I've heard Goswami Kriyananda say, is that uh, joy is the byproduct of serving something greater than oneself. Joy is the byproduct of serving something greater than oneself. So I offer this in the event that as you think about, well, what spiritual practice would I like to strengthen in the coming year, that we might all benefit from considering uh, greater compassion, um, finding ways of serving others in an unselfish way. And that could be through a volunteer organization. It could be um, in your home, with those who are closest to you, trying to make the people that you share your home with, trying to make their lives a little easier, a little smoother. Um, there are just many ways that we can express compassion. Empathy plus action equals compassion. There are many ways that we can express unselfish service in our lives. And so if you're sort of struggling to identify a spiritual practice that you would like to cultivate in the coming weeks and months of this year, perhaps this is one that you could consider. And with that, I'd like to have us do another meditation, this one being on unselfish love. And so, again, if we could just assume a good meditative posture and a good meditative state, perhaps again by beginning with an observation of the breath, observing the breath flowing in and the breath flowing out. Perhaps really attuning to the area at the nostrils to focus our attention on that area. And perhaps we can even sense, it's a more subtle sense of coolness as the air is flowing in through the nostrils, and a little bit of warmth as the air exits the body through the nostrils. Just observing the breath, not trying to control it, not trying not to control it. Simply letting the breath breathe itself while observing. And from this quiet place now, let's see ourselves completely wrapped, saturated, and surrounded by a golden white light, a brilliant, warm white light that saturates and surrounds each and every cell of our being and each and every petal of our mind. And this golden white light, this brilliant, warm white light, is the light of compassion. And it's saturating and surrounding our entire being. You can see it almost like a cocoon from above the top of your head all the way below your feet, your legs, completely saturating and surrounding your entire being. This light is infinite, it's limitless, it has no beginning and no end. It's saturating and surrounding your entire being with compassion, with unselfish love. And feel this compassion, feel it deeply throughout your being. From above the top of your head, all the way down beyond the tips of your toes. Feel it saturating and surrounding your entire being. With the warm, brilliant white light of unselfish love, of compassion. And I'll bring to your mind's eye that mind's eye at the root of the nose in between the eyebrows. Bring to your mind's eye someone dear to you, someone you care deeply for. And from your mind's eye, see this warm, brilliant white light going towards them, saturating each and every cell of their being, each and every petal of their mind with this healing light of unselfish love, with this healing, warm white light of compassion and unselfish love. See them responding positively. See them feeling the warmth of this white light. See them saturated and surrounded by this white light. And know that you are offering this without any expectation, without any attachment to any outcome. And then from that mind's eye, that point at the root of the nose between the eyebrows, see yourself radiating this white light, this brilliant, warm white light of compassion out towards all sentient beings in this world and in all worlds, known and unknown to us. See yourself radiating this white light, this warm, brilliant white light out towards all sentient beings on this planet, in this world, and also in all worlds, known and unknown to us. So that you are radiating compassion, unselfish love to all sentient beings. And in radiating this warm, brilliant white light, you are all the more saturated and surrounded. It's going in all directions. It's going in all directions and beyond direction. And you continue to be saturated and surrounded and filled to overflowing by this white light of compassion, unselfish love. Perhaps now you could bring the attention back to the breath and the nostrils and just noticing the breath flowing in and the breath flowing out. Only serving as a witness, just observing. Now the breath is flowing in, now the breath is flowing out, not trying to control it, not trying not to control it, simply observing the breath. And once again, Shanti. Again, I would just like to say that this practice of compassion, of empathy plus action equals compassion, is something we could all probably benefit from cultivating in the coming year. And yet, it may not be the spiritual practice that you would like to emphasize. And so, um, I would encourage you, in uh, the coming week, perhaps to write down one or two or three practices that you would really like to emphasize this coming year, and perhaps better than just simply writing it down. Perhaps you could write it on a piece of paper and then pin it to your pillow, or pin it to your sleep clothes, your pajamas, or um, and why do we do that? We do it because in the night, each time you wake or you move, you, you'll experience that piece of paper touching you in some way, and it'll be a reminder of the spiritual practice or practices that you wish to strengthen in the coming weeks and months. And in that awareness, even in the night, uh, it's going to be more internalized. It's going to be more strengthened for the coming weeks and months of this new year. So so do that. Think or meditate more on the spiritual practice or practices that you want to develop in the coming year, and that you want to strengthen, um, and um, and write them down, and perhaps even write them in such a way that you will be reminded of them periodically through the night, or even throughout the day. Our I would just perhaps end with this thought that as we think about strengthening our spiritual practices, it's important to remember that our spiritual practice is not an escape from life. Um, it's really about facing life directly and completely. Um, some of us believe that if we progress enough on the spiritual path, our lives will be fundamentally different than they are. And in fact, walking the spiritual path does change our lives, but not in the way that we often think of as we start out on the path. Uh, we may have the notion that, oh, if if I become more spiritual, perhaps I'll have fewer problems. Perhaps I'll experience fewer losses. And the truth is that nothing could be further from the truth. What changes for us as we walk the spiritual path is not that life suddenly becomes smoother, but that our relation to life changes in a very deep and profound way. Um, so it's not so much that there are fewer challenges or there are fewer losses in our lives as we walk the spiritual path. It's really that our relation to our lives changes on a very deep and fundamental level. And so perhaps that's also something to consider as you reflect on today's noon meditation, and you think about what is the practice that I would most like to cultivate in the coming year. I would like to thank you for bringing yourself and your energies to this noon meditation. Again, we will be live streaming more of our noon meditations in the coming year, and the hope is that we can come together in time, if not in space just yet. We can come together at the same time, as has historically been the case with the noon meditation at the temple. coming together at noon Central Time, noon Chicago time. And so with that, I'd like to end our noon meditation today with a prayer. And if you would just join me in good meditative posture one final time for the noon meditation. O great Spirit, saints and sages of all the world's religions, O holy Kriya lineage, thou knowest better than we that which each and every sentient being needs. It is for this and this alone that we meditate. We beseech you to bring it into their lives, surely, swiftly, and most harmoniously. Bless us now, that we might be an even greater blessing to all sentient beings. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Once again, Shanti and blessings.